Well, Joe, thanks for doing this. As I was saying before, I remember when you reached out, and I forget if you showed it to me on Zoom or you texted me a picture, but when you showed a picture of your copy of Snow Leopard and all the post-it notes sticking out of it, I was surprised actually because like I have this perception of you. I've for folks who don't know, Joe is a legend, obviously, with all of the books that he's written, in particular the Experience Economy. But I think of you as not only the thought leader among thought leaders, but someone who the rare thought leader who actually writes their own content and the like. So, because I remember being surprised by that of how many people that I had met, especially in the consulting space. I was quite shocked to find the people who are like, no, 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 I just write, I don't consult, or I consult and I have ghostwriters. And so someone who does both, like it's a rare finding. It's the praise from the praiseworthy. So when I saw that, I was like, oh wow, that was really humbling, and I was grateful for that. But as somebody who is a prolific writer, and obviously a prolific reader, I was curious about your reaction. But yeah, I just love to hear it from the horse's mouth. So.
Well, I appreciate your high confidence, Eddie. I did try a ghostwriter like twice, and they couldn't get my voice. I mean, I could be much more prolific if I had one, if I could feel comfortable doing that. And also, when you write a book on authenticity, it's like hard to think about using a ghostwriter too. Also, but actually, so I have your book right here. It's within easy reach. I have you see all my books behind me, right? So I love books, and over here I've got a stack of like books in current play, particularly as I'm writing this book on transformations. I got a whole stack of transformation books, but this is one I keep handy because this is one I keep recommending when I'm talking with people, right? Is Snow Leopards. And so here's again what Eddie was talking about with the post-it notes, right? So these are all the post-it notes through it. And let's not forget the ones on top. See the difference between the ones on the side. These are like it's all yellow highlighted too, as you'll see in there, right? The ones on the side means this is something great, right? I want to come back and find it. But the ones on the top means this is something I can use now, right? This is something I can think about and be using, right? So that's why I have those on top. And so. So this was wonderful, right? I discovered it from your work on Category Pirates with Christopher Lochhead, and I forget exactly how
Nicholas Cole was the other author who wrote that. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, so that's all I thought. The funny thing, it never says who wrote it. It just says Category Pirates.
We did that on purpose.
I figured you must have, right? You must, because that's too, it's so obvious. It's like, who wrote this? It's the category. That's part of creating your branding, right? With it.
You'll appreciate this, Joe. Is I don't know if we were talking. Oh, you may have read it in one of our articles, but we had bought some data from Nielsen BookScan, for the top couple hundred books of business books for the last 20 years. And what was fascinating was the weird data we found was the correlation between book sales and the size and placement of the name of the author,
right?
And whether or not there was a mugshot of the author on the cover and the like. And so, and what was really interesting was, the hypothesis being the stronger the idea, the less you needed to sell on celebrity or reputation, so to speak. And the inverse was obviously true. So we took it to the extreme on that one, but I just thought,
and also, it
was a fun experiment. So
I was wondering if it like applies to like the little, I noticed you've got the little statement on the top here, like in our updated edition of the Experience Economy, it was the IDEO co-founder Tom Brown, but anyway, he wrote it was like a classic of the 20th century because it was published in 99, updated for the 21st century, something like that they put on top. So that was nice. So an easy way to talk about a little bit is one, it changed my life, and read about it in terms of how I'm writing now. I'll get to that in a little bit. But I thought if I just look at the top post-it notes, right? So the first one is page 61, level 4, how to monetize as a non-obvious creator. Right. And both the fact one of the things I found interesting too, because I'm a framework guy, is that you talk about obvious and non-obvious. as one axis, and obvious and non-obvious as the other axis on the two different things. But you never showed the 2x2, right? And that's, which I've thought, like, well, why aren't you showing the two? Where's the 2x2? I love 2x2s. With my partner Jim Gilmore, we wrote the foreword to a book called The Power of the 2x2 Matrix, and one of the things I've discovered again for my next book is, like, I got too many 2x2s, so a couple of them I'm hiding, right, and not talking about as 2x2. So maybe right, but the notion of being non-obvious, right? How do you monetize that? How do you create a business model that allows you to go, direct to the creator? And then right on page 62, actually, I just realized now the next, the facing page, it says business model, direct to creator for experiences and transformations, right? It's like you're writing it to me, Eddie, right? Experience economy. The next one's the transformation economy. It's all right there. And then just a couple of pages later on page 64 is where you get into non-obvious creators already don't make as much money as obvious creators in the short term. But I love how you talk about the long term and outcome based services, right? So is charging for outcomes is a key thing, and that's what I did on page 67 here. It actually says, if you read the outcome there, outcome here, right? Talk about outcomes, and that's something that, again, I can use because I'll be talking about that in the next book. And then the next one talks about all the ways that you can sell your content, and talks about Pirate Cole, your third author, and how he's been doing this through his Medium paywall. And so it says it's here that instead of writing a book first, you decide to create shorter form content and distribute it via a paid newsletter on a platform like Substack. And that's what I'm doing now, right? Thanks to this book. I'm writing my next book. I'm going beyond experiences to transformations, flowing through the experience economy to the transformation economy, where together, right? I often like to think of them together because you only transform through experiences. They're transformative experiences. So it's really about shifting from goods and services to experiences and transformations, right? Is what's going on. And together they're worth more today than goods and services are. So because of this, I am writing my next book on transformations on Substack, and I'm doing it paid. Originally, I have nowhere near the subscribers you have, Eddie, and I appreciate your recommending it.
You'll probably surpass us.
Well, I don't know. We'll see. You guys produce a lot more output and are wonderful at it, and so conversational like this with it as well. But I already have a large number, about 8% of them consistently are paid subscribers, which is great, and which is higher than average. And so I am making money while I'm writing my next book, but most importantly, I'm getting feedback. And originally I thought, well, I want to get a lot, and I'll charge like maybe $5, maybe $10 per month. And then I was getting close, and I prepared some things. I sort of recognized, I don't want that much feedback. I don't want hundreds of people telling me. I guess because it just takes too much time sifting through it. So I raised the price to $20 a month to $200 a year, and it really is about the right level, right? That works for me. About the right level of getting them. And again, it's because of the book.
It's funny, Joe, because I'm sure over the years, between all your books, the speaking circuit, and your consulting work, you know who some of your quote super consumers are, but the pricing strategy definitely isolates them, right? Because you're not going to get a casual person. What you're really getting is, most people will be like, $200 a year. That's way more than a book. What you're getting are the people that you have transformed through your prior work, and through in their careers, probably their personal lives, and in their minds are like, this is a fraction of the value that Joe and his authors have created for me. I can't wait to see what's next, right? And so that's the part that I love about it, and that and it's funny to think about, just as, because your content and your frameworks have been so significant to the business community, to think about, your experience economy framework related to books, because oftentimes, books are more often than not goods. I have a need, someone told me to read it. I read it, got the information done,
Right.
never see it
Done.
again.
Right.
And then what I love about the dog ear or the post-it notes, and I think people will get a lot of benefit from how Joe Pine reads is, things that'll be, this was important. I want to come back to it, but things that are useful now at the top. But that becomes much more of a service, right? Because then now you can refer
Yep.
back as a reference. And
Yep.
then I think the experience is a totally different one. People will have an experience reading a book, certainly. And I think it tends to be more fiction related than nonfiction. But transformation is the ultimate goal, as you're writing about. And I think partly what we concluded was just like if we want to transform people to unleash 100,000 category designers, it can't be a one-way communication. It has to be a dialogue of some sort. And that's what Substack enables, and then ultimately the
Right.
courses that we get to. So, like
Right.
in many respects, if we were smarter, we would go. Or actually, since Snow Leopard, we can always go back and add to it. We could layer in that concept of, I think, what we're both on the journey of is transforming the book category and using
Right.
your framework.
Right. Right. And it's also for many people, like you said, they're my super consumers, so they're getting this, and for them, like this is an event, right? In my day, that I get this latest, and I'm sure it's for many of your subscribers. I get the latest thinking
Mm-hmm.
of Joe Pine, whoever he is, and they remember that, right? And a lot of people are actually who I know because they're super consumers. They are contacting me outside of Substack and sending me emails and calling and things like that because they really love something, they want to talk about it further. And it's so interesting. So we had a think about event that we ran for 20 years, and people that came to that multiple times are super consumers. A lot of people just came once, but the people that came multiple times, some people came 10 times out of more out of the 20. And we have an experience accounting expert certification course. We got over
Mm-hmm.
300, close to like 350 now, certified experienced accounting
Wow.
experts in the world. I just did a class last month in Riyadh and gained 14 more. And these are people that are paid many thousands of dollars to become that.
Yes.
And I see a lot of those that are subscribed here. All the time I get people tell me I changed their life. They connect with me on LinkedIn, and I respond and say, hey, you changed my life because I read your book, because they're doing things differently. Or at the World Experience Summit in June. And again, Snow Leopard, changed my life because of what I've learned in this and how I'm now doing it. The next post-it note I have is on page 206. It talks about where part of your research is you said that also that is those books that had a level of personal development, right, were higher
Yes.
selling. And I found that very interesting. And I actually, that's one of my goals here for this book is I'm going to try and avoid, I'm going to tend to be a little bit academic. You heard the part about the 2x2s, right? So I tend to will often use the word one, right? Where one does this and that. No, it's always you. It's always you. And in some cases, I tell personal stories about myself, about situations I was transformed, or my stepfather, my daughter,
Wow.
and I think if I can get people to see themselves in the book, that yes, I am one who transformed. I have gone through that process. I can see where I did that in that 2x2. Then it's going to catch them more and get them to internalize it more, and therefore say, hey, this is something I can do for my customers. I used to love doing. It's interesting. We love doing that with experiences. Where often I'd work with the client. One of the first things I like to do is take him out on a learning excursion or an experience expedition. Go out in a experience hub city like Las Vegas or New York or Chicago, LA, Amsterdam, London, and get them to experience it as a consumer, and then they can, in both good experiences and bad experiences, then they can see how that then can affect them. And I have them develop sheets of, do debrief on, develop sheets of ideas just from the principles of what they learn to do or not to do in these various places. I'm not sure I can fully do that with transformations, because you generally don't have one transformative experience when you're walking around the city visiting very different places. But I have to be thinking about more about how to do that, at least get them again to think about themselves in that way. So I thought, that's again, one more thing that I'm doing as a result of reading the book.
That personal development one, I was so disappointed with the analysis, because I was like, oh, clearly strategy and insight, that's going to be the top selling thing. And then it was like, duh, it's not about you, it's about them, the reader. And that personal development, personal finance part, as you said, so critically important. It's remarkable to me, just partly what I hope from this, if Category Pirates is trying to unleash all these category designers, that Snow Leopard encourages people to write more, but specifically not to write just about them, but to write to transform other people. Like, it's basically, if you could take Snow Leopard and your transformations book and put them together with the same kind of post-it note to every author out there, I think you'd get very different books. And the book category would grow, because then people would realize it's not just about, here's my story and I'm trying to monetize my brand, or I'm trying to, convince you of something, versus no, I am trying to help you go from here to here. And it's going to be meaningful for you personally, perhaps financially as well. And whatever the topic, like, we are here to help. And a $30 book is more than worth that in that scenario. That's what I really, really hope now that comes out.
Which reminds me, yet another thing I'm doing because of you. This notion you have of doing mini books and that sort of thing. I'm not sure I'm going to do that per se of the content that goes into the book, because I'm actually signing this week or next book contract where we have shared a publisher there, who my initial reaction was they weren't sure about this personal development stuff in the book, but we'll just sort of, if they're not listening, right, we'll just sort of put it in there and then see what happens. But what I am going to do, because also one of the things I've been challenged by from others, is to how do you make the book transformative? You say, the book's a physical good. It can certainly transform you by reading, but it's unlikely to unless they really reflect on, unless they do things as a result of it. So akin to your mini books, I'm going to create a what I'm calling a transformation toolkit. So I'm going to take, from every chapter, and sometimes multiples, I'm going to take a set of tools, give you the framework, give you a write-up of them, and give you instructions on how to go through this tool. And so it'll be a booklet. It might, I'm thinking it's probably like 4 to 6 pages per tool when you give them enough text, so they don't have to have read the book to be able to do it. And it'll remind them of it, and have 10, 12 tools in it. And you go through that, right? And you work through that. Well, you will have transformed your business and what you're doing. And then I'll offer basically an hour consulting on every one of the tool, where I can give you feedback and help you make it, and really help you make it sing in terms of what you're doing too. So that'll be a great opportunity to be able to, meet with people one-on-one and really understand what their issues are, and helping them transform without doing a big, consulting project.
Joe, like, what's so cool about this is, to the publisher we share in common, like, who all the world of respect for, like, just,
I wouldn't go to
above every other publisher out there,
right? If it were, except going with 100%. Them.
Yes, I know the Harvard Business Review Press guys are, and I just give them so much credit for, allowing this kind of quote category or business model innovation from the writing process with you. And you'd mentioned some of the others that they're experimenting with, because, it's such a counterintuitive thing for a place that is celebrated for its ideas and the power of its ideas, to take a step back and say, well, wait a minute, what good is an idea if it doesn't deliver an outcome? It has to transform the reader and or the business or the organization that's consuming it. And what I think is happening, with the transformation toolkit, what I love about that, and I'm so tickled that Snow Leopard kind of helped inspire this, is that the toolkit, as you said, causes the self-reflection. Right. In the toolkit also, I can imagine, as we're all playing around with generative AI and ChatGPT, like what I have found was that conversing with ChatGPT, obviously it's got a ways to go before it's a real conversation with, like, you or with a close friend or a therapist or, a mentor or whatever. But it's not a bad proxy if you're using it to try to reflect. Hey, I just read Joe's book on transformation. Here's a couple of prompts. How do I think about, am I really ready to transform? Am I actually willing to leave behind the old and embrace the new? And, you could see that as a, kind of journaling on steroids, to make sure that you are actually, your soul is prepared to transform, as well as the other baggage there. But then when I think about the legacy kind of experience, the total experience of books, especially books that you love and books that transform people, which, by the way, Barnes and Nobles should definitely have a transformation section. These books will change your life in these aspects, like versus information. But like, book clubs, that's kind of how people would consume books and get that community to talk about it. And I would have to believe that book clubs who read together and discuss them have a higher percentage of transformation and outcomes that come out of it. And we've been doing that digitally, and as you said, like, there's a world where you can envision these digital communities combined with generative AI, combined with I don't know if you've seen the things we're doing with 11 Labs, Joe, about the audiobooks, where I've trained it on our podcasts, and so we're creating audiobooks, but it's the AI is reading it and not me.
Right.
But it sounds like me. I've been sharing that with you.
No.
But so
I've had two people tell me they want to digest all my writing and then create an avatar that you can ask questions of that. And I would love to have that at some point.
Well,
right?
That's where I think we're headed is, can you imagine a digital book club focused on your book transformations with a digital chatbot, Joe Pine's AI, leading it in your voice, but trained on, it's funny, at some level, there's a niche within books that probably is unknowingly ahead of the curve with this, is kind of the whole, Christian publishing on, Purpose-Driven Life by Rick Warren is a book about transformations. And, there's the book, but then I don't even know, but like, I'm sure it spawned toolkits, book clubs, study guides, all of these types of materials that actually
same thing with Experiencing God, which is probably like an order of
Experiencing God, like Henry Blackaby,
came out with workbooks and all these things and doing it.
Yeah. And those are, and it's funny to think about how there are these niches, I think, maybe self-help and Christian publishing and some others maybe in the fitness space or whatever, like, where it is very clear, like, the idea itself is a means to an ends of the actual outcome, and they have done a much better job of spawning the tools, toolkits, and communities that will help. And I think the business community could learn a lot from that. And so where we often do much of our writing in, but that's the part that I'm super psyched about, is what we are thrilled with is if, it's one thing if we do it, it's an entirely different thing if Joe Pine is also doing it as well too.
It's once you get in this mindset, there's just this bountiful set of ideas that can continue to flow from it.
Yeah. Well, to your point about, you writing transformations, maybe we'll have to write a companion to Snow Leopard, which is, Snow Leopard Part 2 or whatever, or the non-obvious version of it. But your experiences, our experiences, and hopefully others. Like I've told every other business author that I know who is kind of prolific like you or us, and like, hey, this is kind of the way to go. And I hope you experiment with it. And that people who actually write their own content, they're advising and consulting, and they're doing some sort of beyond the book teaching community, like, it just makes a lot of sense. And that hopefully when we get critical mass, then the tools will catch up and help us deliver the experiences, because it's clearly the advent of no code tools, super helpful, right? So that we can have these technology vehicles that don't require technical skills, at least for me. So that's what I'm excited about. So. But if anything, thank you for this. I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to share, but
I'll mention.
By the way,
one
Joe Pine's system.
Yeah,
for how to read books is definitely a mini book you should publish.
Right. That is good. I have thought about, like, the previous book that changed my life was Stan Davis's Future Perfect from 1987, which I read as a strategic planner at IBM, and that launched my book career through many different means. But I've often thought about, what if I sold his book with my highlights in it, right? My notes in it, and that it would be sort of cool to do that.
You know what, Joe? We talked about the content might be more valuable than the original content. And in the same way that Tom Brady's going to get paid more money to talk about football than play it, like, we should talk about, this would be an amazing collab, is like for us to release your version of Snow Leopard with your highlights and tick marks and the like.
Right.
Because
And
We could do that, and we could have you record it with your AI voice and
that's right.
talk about it.
Exactly. Right. Read Snow Leopard with my commentary on it. So I mentioned one other thing. You talked earlier, the image in my mind of Snow Leopard and the transformation book together, right? And so there is one company, one person in particular, Kim Korn, who actually was my
Yes.
co-author of my book Infinite Possibility, about fusing the real and the virtual. And I told him, because he's been writing a book for a very long time, but have never completed the book, and now in part because he got involved with his son's company that is disrupting financial services and turning it into transformations. A company called Simpliny. And so I told him he had to get Snow Leopard, he had to read it, and he read it and devoured it. And I thought, okay, now he's finally going to write the book. No, he's applying it all to Simpliny about category design. He read your category design book and that, and experience accounting and transformations, and it's all there together in what they're doing in this wonderful small company that already has billions and billions of dollars under management, because they're thinking about the experience, in particular the transformation that people have. Because I always say money is a means to an end, right? If you sell the end rather than the means, then you're going to gain much more value, and that's that outcome of a transformation. So there's one company that has combined them both. Maybe you should have them on at some point as well too.
I'll definitely, because I've been meaning to follow up with him, because we've definitely been, if you shared some of his lovely visual that made you a little upset, like the position of Snow Leopard. But yeah, no, I think that whole lane of books becoming much more like the music industry, where it's common practice to sample a riff from a prior artist. Like, I don't see why that wouldn't be the case of, like if you wrote a mini book of like Joe Pine's guide to what I loved and found useful about Snow Leopard and vice versa. I don't want to get down too much of a rabbit hole, but the part that is absolutely clear, having talked to a couple of book publishers, is book guilt. Is there's way more people who buy books and don't read them. Of the people who read books, they have a list of books that they need to get through, want to get through, don't have time. They're halfway or part way, they haven't started, and they feel guilty about it. And, the reality is, the data that I've seen is that the number of people who are prolific readers, who can consume that amount of content, like it's like any other muscle, like there are not that many people who actually are good at reading in high quality and high quantity. And so what they probably need is a mini book, or I trust Joe Pine, I trust his take on it, and I would much rather consume those 5,000 words than the 50,000 in the book.
Interesting, right? So instead of Cliff Notes,
it's solving for book guilt.
Joe Pine's notes, Cliff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Joe's notes. I mean, absolutely, because like, who's Cliff? I don't care who Cliff is, and like, I care what Joe Pine thinks. Why should I trust Cliff? So. No, but this is great. We can always jam about this all day long, but I'm sure as you go through, your transformation book. And by the way, anyone should absolutely subscribe to Joe's transformation Substack if you want to see what a legend. It's like watching a cooking show with a 3-star Michelin chef prepare the dish, try it out. Like if you want to have that experience, you should absolutely sign up. But I'm very grateful for your friendship and your partnership, and can't wait to keep collaborating with you and your ecosystem.
All right, super. Thank you, Eddie. I appreciate it.
Thanks.